You know what's strange? We have a word for people who love parties: extroverts. We celebrate them. We build entire social structures around them. The after-work drinks, the birthday dinners, the networking events, the "you really should come out more." But there's this whole other type of person that just exists quietly on the other side of that equation. The ones who cancel plans and feel relief. The ones who look forward to Friday night because it means staying home. And here's what nobody tells you. The psychology behind people who don't go out is probably one of the most misunderstood areas in all of human behavior. We pathologize it immediately. We call it social anxiety, depression, avoidance. We send concerned texts. We assume something must be wrong. But what if the story is a lot more complicated than that? What if staying in isn't a symptom of something broken, but a deeply rational response to how certain minds are actually wired? Let's start with what's actually happening in the brain. Neuroscience has identified something called the dopamine reward system, and it doesn't work the same way in everyone. For high extroversion individuals, social interaction floods the brain with dopamine. It's genuinely energizing at a neurochemical level. Walking into a party, scanning the room, striking up a conversation, that's a hit. That's a reward. But for others, the same situation produces a different response entirely. The stimulation doesn't feel like fuel. It feels like noise. Research published in the journal Frontiers in Human Neuroscience found that introverted individuals show greater blood flow in the frontal lobes, the regions associated with internal processing, planning, and self-reflection, compared to extroverts, who show greater activity in areas linked to sensory processing and social reward. This isn't a personality quirk, it's architecture. The brain of someone who doesn't go out is, quite literally, more interested in what's happening on the inside than what's happening in the room. But here's where it gets fascinating. It's not just about introversion. Picture this. It's a Sunday morning and you've just had 3 consecutive days of social events. A work thing Thursday, a birthday dinner Friday, a get-together at someone's house Saturday. You wake up Sunday and instead of feeling connected and refreshed, you feel scraped out. Like something has been taken from you. You cancel your plans for the afternoon without a second thought and spend the day doing almost nothing. And you feel, against all social messaging that says you should feel lonely or lazy, completely fine. Psychologists call this social recovery time. And it's real. Even enjoyable social interaction consumes a specific type of cognitive resource: attention management, emotional regulation, the constant low-level processing of facial expressions, tones of voice, social cues, unspoken rules. For people who don't go out regularly, this processing is turned up higher. They're not less socially skilled. Often they're more attuned. They just feel the cost of it more acutely. Hans Eysenck, the psychologist who pioneered modern extroversion research in the 1960s, proposed something called the arousal theory. The idea that extroverts have a chronically lower baseline of cortical arousal, meaning they need more external stimulation to feel alert and engaged. Introverts start at a higher baseline. They're already running hotter internally. At a crowded bar or a loud dinner party, and you've crossed from stimulation into overwhelm very quickly. But there's something else going on here that goes beyond neuroscience. Something cultural and almost generational. We live in an era that has aggressively monetized social performance. Every outing is a potential post. Every gathering is content. Every experience exists not just in the moment, but in the documentation of the moment. The tagging, the check-ins, the stories, the carefully angled photos at the restaurant. There's a social tax now that didn't used to exist. You're not just going out. You're going out while also producing evidence that you went out. And for certain people, that layer of performance is so exhausting that the entire proposition stops being appealing at all. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania conducted a study where participants who reduced social media use reported feeling less pressure to appear socially active. The going out culture and the showing you're going out culture have become so fused that opting out of one increasingly means opting out of both. People who don't go out aren't just avoiding crowds. Sometimes they're quietly rejecting a whole economy of performed living. And then there's the quality versus quantity calculation. People who don't go out tend to think about connection differently. They're not opposed to people. They're opposed to diluted people. Surface-level small talk at a party of 40 feels actively worse than one long, honest conversation at a kitchen table with someone they actually trust. It's not that they can't do the small talk. It's that the cost-benefit analysis comes out negative every single time. They leave those events feeling less connected than when they arrived, which is the opposite of the point. A 2019 study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that depth of conversation was the primary predictor of reported feelings of social satisfaction in introverted individuals. They don't need more, they need more real. Now, here's the part that gets complicated. Because not everyone who stays home is doing it from a place of contentment. There's a spectrum here, and it's worth being honest about both ends of it. On one end, you have what psychologists sometimes call volitional solitude. The person who genuinely prefers their own company, who has rich inner resources, who reads and creates and thinks and exists in a kind of quiet fullness. Research consistently shows that the ability to be comfortably alone correlates with higher emotional intelligence, greater self-awareness, and stronger identity formation. Being okay by yourself, really okay, not performing okayness while feeling hollow inside, is actually a marker of psychological health. But on the other end, there's something darker. There's the person who wants to go out but can't, who rehearses a text asking to hang out and then deletes it, and gets invited somewhere and feels a surge of anxiety so specific and physical that declining feels like the only rational option. The difference between these two people can look identical from the outside. Same empty Friday nights, same quiet phone. But the internal experience couldn't be more different. Social anxiety affects roughly 12% of the population at some point in their lives, making it one of the most prevalent mental health conditions that exists. And its cruelest feature is that it mimics preference. It tells you that you don't want to go, when the truth is that you're afraid to. It reframes fear as personality. And people accommodate it, rationalize it, build a whole identity around it because acknowledging the fear means acknowledging the limitation. And that's the harder thing to sit with. The research on behavioral avoidance is unambiguous on this point. Avoidance provides immediate relief and long-term reinforcement of the fear. Every time you don't go, the not going feels safer. The world outside gets a little more unfamiliar. The bar for leaving the house gets quietly raised. It's a slow process. Nobody notices it happening, not even the person it's happening to. So how do you tell the difference? How does someone know whether they're a genuine homebody or someone whose world is quietly contracting? Psychologists point to one key variable: distress. If you decline the invitation and feel relief and contentment, that's preference. If you decline and feel relief layered on top of shame, on top of longing, on top of a vague grief about who you used to be or who you thought you'd become, that's something else. Because here's the thing about people who don't go out. Both types, the contented solitary and the quietly struggling avoider, tend to share one specific trait. They're hard on themselves about it. The homebody feels pressure to justify their preferences in a world that treats sociability as virtue. The anxious avoider feels shame they can't always name. Both have been told, in 1,000 direct and indirect ways, that the life they're living is a lesser version of the one they're supposed to want. And that cultural message is itself worth interrogating. There's a reason the most profound human insights tend to come from states of solitude. Isaac Newton worked out the laws of gravity during a period of enforced isolation when Cambridge closed due to plague. Darwin spent years on quiet, solitary observation. The monastic traditions across virtually every major world religion identified solitude not as deprivation, but as a precondition for depth. The capacity to be alone, to sit with yourself without immediately reaching for stimulation or company or noise, is a capacity that most people never fully develop. And the people who don't go out, for all the ways we worry about them, are often the ones developing it most. They know what their own thoughts sound like. They know how to entertain themselves. The truth is, staying in isn't the problem. It never really was. The question has always been a simpler and harder one. Are you alone because you chose it, or alone because you ran out of other options and called it a choice? Only you know the answer to that. And if this one hit somewhere real for you, the subscribe button is right there. See you next video!